When you go on a trip, do you plan things?
No, I have weaponized plan or weaponized type B.
Yeah.
Where like no one's gonna put me in charge.
No, but if
Pretty great.
when we travel, it's like I got a plan. Oops, I got a plan. I did it twice. Why did I swear twice?
We thought you were gonna like not do it, and you were like, no, I need to emphasize. Make sure you hit that. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Per My Last Email, the show where we give you the hot takes and tactics to navigate work life. My name is Kyle Hagee.
And I'm Kaila Lopez.
And we're the co-hosts of the show. That's
Correct.
why we're here with some mics, and we're going to talk about career mapping.
Yep,
And
very exciting stuff.
career planning. I generally do think it's very exciting. You got to have a plan to get where you're going.
Okay, so that's a good segue. Do you?
No.
Do you plan your career?
I plan, and I think in a different way than it's commonly used.
Okay, why?
I think a lot of people have this idea that they need like a 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very linear. It's going to be step by step. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. Like, life does not happen for that. There's a famous saying, like, a plan 5 years in the future is a plan for someone that doesn't exist yet. Like, you're going to change. Your desires are going to change. The impact you want to have is going to change. And so I think if you're making long-term plans and being very rigid with them, you get into a position where like what you thought you were going to be doing 5 years ago is not what you want to do now, but you still feel tethered to this plan. So I think I have a plan of attack, but then I'm more focused on like the day-to-day, how I feel, and I'm very flexible with that plan. Mm-hmm. What about you? Because you're more type A than me.
I am way more type A than you.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, though, I also don't really have, like, I've never really career mapped before.
Okay.
For that same reason, I feel like if I did, because I am type A, I would be like, oh my gosh, it is August 9th.
Yeah.
And I said I was going to be the blah, blah, blah on August 8th,
yeah.
you know? And
I'm so behind.
I'm a failure.
Yeah.
So for that reason, like knowing myself, I almost think it's better for my career if I don't create these like benchmarks specifically that are far out in my career.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I guess one downside with the plan is then, you're holding yourself accountable to that plan. Yeah. And if things are going well, then you're like motivated and excited. But yeah, if you fall behind your plan, it's very easy to be like, oh God, like what am I doing wrong? You have this like big existential crisis when like you made the plan in the first place. Like you don't need to be beholden to it. That being said, I know you said you don't plan. You have made like big pivots in your career. Mm-hmm. You were working at banks. Every time I say what you do, I make up a new thing, but it was like something in banks and finance.
Yep.
And then now you're not doing anything related to that. So walk me through, you say you don't plan, you've never career mapped, but there had to be a point where you said, I don't want to go down this path. I want to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Like, how did you decide to do that?
It's actually, it's a good question. I think for me, the one that I really was very intentional about was leaving finance. Mm-hmm. Because I think when you enter finance, there's a lot of expectations on where your career goes. Similar to like, you probably don't need to career map if you're like a doctor or something, or like a lawyer. I don't know. I don't know a lot about either.
Lawyers are going to be...
Don't get mad at me.
Don't piss off lawyers, Kayla.
I know.
They're going to litigate us to hell.
But it feels like, okay, you study to become a doctor, you become a doctor. It's like, okay, you're not going to become like a senior doctor. I mean, I actually don't know how doctors work. But like, you're not going to probably pivot your entire career. It feels a little bit more stable. You probably don't need to career map. With something like finance, there's similar expectations, which is, you spend 2 years and then you get promoted to an associate, and then you spend 3 years and you get promoted to a VP, all of them the same. Maybe you get a little crazy and 3 years in, you go to the buy side, which is like private equity or hedge funds.
Okay, that's what that means. Nice.
Yeah. But like, there's limited flexibility within that path. And so when I started, it felt like I was kind of set on this path for my entire career.
Like you kind of knew intuitively, like in 20 years, if I stick with this path, this is where I'm going to end up.
This is where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And so
you'll have like 3 divorces, but you'll have a yacht.
Maybe 2. Yeah. But that felt very clearly not what I wanted. And so in order to kind of pivot out of that, I felt I had to be a little bit more intentional.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing, which I think is we should discuss this, because what is career mapping? What is career planning?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, I want to be a director of whatever in 3 years.
Correct.
It can be, what do I want to do? What inspires me? What is exciting for me? So that's what I did, is I thought of my calendar, of my schedule, of my day. What is the most exciting for me? Where do I feel the most like energized and passionate and sad when the work changes?
Yeah.
And for me, that was writing the actual like reports based on the financials.
Yeah.
And so, as a baby finance person, I didn't get to do that a lot, because typically I was writing the drafts and then my analyst was, actually creating them. But I loved the editing process. I loved looking through all of their stuff. I had from my last year, I had an analyst who English wasn't their first language. And so they relied on me a lot to do a lot of the editing. Loved that.
Yeah, so you got a lot of reps in.
I got a lot of reps in. I really enjoyed it. And so then I started thinking like, maybe this content thing is like where I should go next. It's something that's really driving me. And I really like the process of like looking at a half-baked article and like making it better.
Yeah.
And so I ended up pursuing editorial jobs.
There's something really interesting in here that I think is powerful, and it is like you were focused more on what type of work do I like, and like how do I feel when I'm doing that work, and kind of like what's the impact I want to have on the work. And I think that is really important to suss out. That's like self-awareness, which I think is actually the harder thing to do, but the more important thing to do, as opposed to just saying in 1 year I want to get promoted.
Yeah.
And then in another year I want to get promoted. Like you haven't really done the internal reflections necessary to decide what type of work you want to do.
Yeah.
That's much more important, I think, than like an arbitrary plan of when you're going to get promoted.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Like,
Okay.
what is a career plan in the way that we think is actually productive?
Yeah, well, I'll answer this in reverse, which is like, I think the typical career plan is, okay, I work at X, and at X, I want to get promoted to director in 3 years. And so here's probably what I have to do to get there. It feels very like title specific. I want to have this title by this date. That I think is wrong. Like I just don't think that's very productive. And the way you're going to get that title is not just thinking you're going to get the title. I think what a career plan should be is first like figuring out where you are very spiky. So we've talked a ton about like spiky traits. It's like identifying what you're very good at or very spiky at that allows you to have big impact. And that requires a lot of self-awareness. Like, so for me, I've done this. I would say like one is like sensitivity. Like I'm pretty like a sensitive person.
Yeah.
Like when people are like, don't care about what other people think about you, I care a ton. I want people to like feel good, and I want to like help them. And so for stuff like community roles that I was doing before Chief of Staff, like that was super helpful, because if you don't give a
You need
F,
some
like,
emotional awareness.
you need a lot of like emotion, and that can be a really positive thing, but it can also be a really negative thing. But it helps you put yourself in the right context where that can be a superpower. The other thing is curiosity. Like I'm so interested in so many things that I think any role that is very narrow and repetitive in scope, I'm going to get bored easily. I need something that has a lot of breadth, which my role now as Chief of Staff, like there's a ton of breadth. So that's a really good fit for me. And then I think the other thing is like energy and enthusiasm. Whenever I would do public speaking or be running these cohorts, people would always be like, you just have like a lot of energy. And we pick up on that, and it motivates us. Now, that might not be good if I was like a lawyer. Maybe you want someone a little more like sober and less enthusiastic. So again, they're not like all strengths. They're strengths and weaknesses, but it helps you identify what roles would be great for you. So I think that's like the first step, is like knowing yourself.
Yeah, I really like that. So do you think that when you were making the career pivot, do you think you were deeply thinking about those traits?
Yeah, 100%. Like I wanted a role that I thought I could succeed in, obviously. And if I couldn't use those spiky traits as a superpower in that role, it was unlikely that I was going to be effective in the role. And so I was mapping a lot of that to those types of roles. So I think that's like really important for career planning, is first identifying like who you are and what your spiky traits are. The second thing that I think is really important, and that I think people don't do enough of in career planning, is like little experiments to figure out what you actually like to do. There's a great quote from Herminia Ibarra, who's a researcher at the London School of Economics, who said, "We don't find out who we are through theory. We find it out through practice." And I think a lot of people just think, they're like, would I like to be a lawyer? Well, I'm just going to go and think about it for an hour. Oh yeah, I would. Like, let's go pursue that. But you don't actually really know until you've done being a lawyer. Like, there's things you just can't intuit. And so I think one of the best things you can do in terms of career planning early in your career is try to do as many things as possible, because then you actually have evidence of what you like and what you don't like. And if you don't do that and you make a plan, it's very easy to get stuck, you know, on this 10-year plan where you're like, shit, I don't actually like to do this, but I've only done it, so I don't know what else I could do. Then you feel stuck and you're in a pretty bad spot.
Okay, so Kyle's advice is, if you want to be a doctor, buy a white coat, show up to the hospital, see what you can do.
It worked for me.
Little experiments.
I got fired within an hour, and I knew it wasn't right for me.
I fainted at the sight of blood, and I said, "Okay, here we go." No, but I think what you're saying is actually very, very helpful, because a career plan, it's the same as like that Winston Churchill quote, which is like, planning is essential, plans are useless.
Yeah, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Also, that quote has been attributed to every single person.
I was about to say, maybe that's wrong.
So as Jesus Christ said.
I think I might have gotten that wrong, but whoever said it, they were very smart. Because it does feel right. And I think that it's the same thing as career planning or career mapping without self-awareness is useless.
Yeah.
Because all you're saying is, I think I want to do these things, but you're not really thinking about why, or if that's actually like a good path for you.
Yeah, I love that take. And I think the other thing that I see a lot of people, like, it kind of frustrates me, is when people are really excited about getting a particular role. It seems very arbitrary, and particularly if it's just like, I want the title CEO, or like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a founder. Like that, to me, that's like an easy way to end up in a spot where you're very disappointed, because a title is like a shiny thing, but after a week, you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And what I think is more important is for people to have a really deep understanding of the impact they want to make. Like, what kind of impact do you want to have in the world? Do you want to create content that's like really inspiring? Do you want to do direct service and be working with communities to change, you know, the landscape? Are you really like, you want to have impact on like the financial system and you kind of nerd out on spreadsheets? I think really understanding like the impact that drives you is something that often people don't talk about. They just talk about the shiny title. I think that's a recipe for disaster as well.
Yeah, especially if you're like, if I'm not a CEO in 5 years, it means that I'm a huge failure. You're going to feel like a failure most of the time.
Yeah.
Even if you do make that CEO title, you're like, well, shit, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
This sucks.
And like, if you say I want to be a CEO, like, there's a million industries you could become a CEO in. In fact, it's every single industry possible. And so I just don't think you're ever going to achieve that if you're not in an industry that you actually care about. Because if you care about it, you're going to do better work, you're going to be more motivated, and that's going to allow you to rise. But if you're just arbitrarily chasing this title, you're going to be working in an industry that you don't actually care about, and it's going to be tough to produce the quality of work necessary to rise to that level.
We'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show. So going back to what you were just talking about, besides like the title specifically, thinking about what impact you want to have, what type of work you want to do. We actually like this we kind of think about this as the North Star, right, of your career. And I think when you're doing a career map, thinking about it not as where do I want to be, but like, what is my guiding light throughout my career? I think that's a lot more effective. And all of this that like we're talking about, I'm actually pulling from this toolkit that we did back at Morning Brew Learning.
That's right.
That Charlotte wrote, that is amazing. We do sell it, but I'm not going to try and be like too salesy. But if you feel like you're stuck, you want to do it, check it out. The link is in the show notes, and you can also go to shop.morningbrew.com.
Wow, what a plug, Kaila.
Sorry, I felt like if I'm mentioning it so much, we're talking about it a lot. Might as well, if you want to go deeper, and just buy it.
Yeah.
It's $29. Anyways, but the North Star is basically thinking about what is your guiding light? Like, what drives you? What are you interested in? Where do you ultimately want to be in your career? And not necessarily choosing every single step you need to get to the CEO title, but instead using that as the like system or equation basically that you run all of your decisions through. Does this get me closer to that North Star? So instead of saying I want to be a CEO, like you said, you could be, you know, I want to have an impact in the financial industry or
Right.
whatever. So I'm curious if you have a North Star, what is it?
I just was like dunking on people who don't have it. And I'm like, oh, you put me on the hot seat. I mean, I think it has changed throughout my career, which we can talk about the flexibility of that. Right away, when I was leaving college, my North Star was like, I really wanted to do something I felt like was like impactful from like a service point of view. Like I felt like I had grown up with a ton of opportunities, and I don't think opportunity is equally distributed across America. And so I really wanted to do something that I felt like was like increasing opportunity somewhere that didn't have as much that I had growing up. It felt like, to me, the right thing to do. So that was the impact. And I think you can have that impact across industries. I think I was a little more narrow-minded, where I felt like the only way to do that was through like nonprofit work at the time. And so that's why I did AmeriCorps. Like it felt like this is really connecting to my North Star. I probably would have done AmeriCorps across like a bunch of different industries, which I think goes back to our point that if you have this North Star that's more impact focused, then you could be more flexible. So I ended up teaching. Teaching wasn't like my North Star, but it was a way for me to have that impact. I think I've kept some of that throughout my career, the impact piece, but it hasn't necessarily been like as direct service focused. What about you?
Yeah, so like what I was mentioning at the beginning, where I felt like I had to do a lot of the work right after my finance role and deciding what I wanted to do next. I decided at that point that my North Star was basically to create impact through content and writing specifically. And that manifested itself as being an editor at like a tech startup, which isn't, and it was really fun. And it was like and I think that it was exactly what I wanted at the time. And I think my next job, which was Morning Brew Learning and was content there, also fit that North Star.
Yep.
Now, I'm not really in that same spot. I'm, thinking about consumer revenue. I feel like my North Star needs to change. But because of the way that I've made that pivot, I haven't really thought about what my new North Star is, or if I'm just like now in a position that's like at odds with what my ultimate goal is. So it's kind of like this weird like cognitive dissonance where I'm like, am I changing what my North Star is now, or am I just like messing up on my career path?
Yeah. No, I think, well, you have some homework to do. Hopefully
I know, yikes.
Hopefully this conversation is illuminating, but I love the vulnerability there. And I think one of the benefits of not, again, tying yourself to a specific role, but having this North Star is I do think it's more like values driven. And I think the brilliant thing about values, or the powerful thing about values, is no matter what your role is, you can exhibit them. So, oftentimes, like I was saying, I was pretty maybe narrow-minded early in my career, where I thought if you want to have positive impact in the world, you have to be doing direct service, you have to work for a nonprofit. But I think some of the greatest, change agents, obviously there's some in that space, but they also maybe work in politics, maybe they work in business. And I think you can be someone who is a CEO of like a large multinational company and still have very strong values that are about making a positive impact in the world. And I think that is powerful. And if you don't lose sight of those, you can make a really positive impact on your North Star, no matter what your role is. If you don't have those values, I think it's very easy to get in a position where like, okay, now you're just maximizing some arbitrary thing, shareholder value, compensation, and it's very easy then, I think, to get like burned out or feel like I don't actually care about the work, and that's not a spot you want to be in. But if you don't do the work to figure out what your values are, what your North Star is, then you're never going to know, and you're going to wind up in a bad position.
Okay, but what if somebody's North Star is maximizing their own compensation?
Look, shout out to you. Go off.
What if they're like, I don't care what I'm doing, I want to make as much money as possible. I know some people like that.
I salute them for figuring it out. They've done their homework. That's quite good. The other thing I wanted to run by you is I think this idea between commitment and like optionality. So what's interesting to me is I think when many people are mapping their careers, they get a role. They have a new role, they're excited about it, and then 3 months in, the shine starts to wear off a little bit. It's not as perfect as you thought it would be. And there's probably two like mental models people use. The first is, okay, it's not as perfect as I thought it would be, but I'm going to commit fully to this role because it's still good, and I'm going to make the most out of it, and I'm going to see where this takes me. The other mental model is, oh man, there's some shiny objects out there though.
Right.
That new role looks really, really good. I'm going to go pursue that. How would you like walk someone through deciding, should I commit to the thing that's good but not perfect? Or like, yeah, it's time to move on and go chase some new shiny object along your career map.
It's a really specific and interesting situation. The one thing when you were speaking that kind of came up in my mind was that Tim Urban graphic that shows like, we'll post it on our socials because I love this graphic. Basically, it's like a decision tree and all the possible options that you could have taken in your life.
Yep.
And all of them are grayed out from your past.
Yeah.
So, maybe you zig and zag, whatever, but like you can't go back and make a different decision. But where you are, like if you are here, then the future is all the decision trees of like all the possible directions you can take. And either staying or going is like gonna put you on a different path.
Yeah.
So I think when you're in this decision-making moment, do I stick with like what I'm supposed to be doing or what I'm doing now or like this shiny new thing? First of all, I personally am a little bit more biased towards sticking it out just for a little bit longer, especially if you've done all the research and you feel like this was the right move at the time. But I think understanding the like secondary like knock-on effects of either decision will help you make that choice.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think you're spot on, and I do also love that graphic. It's like an internet banger.
I know.
Like everyone, I see it tweeted every day.
He really cooks with that one.
I think it's one of those things where like this is the double-edged sword of rigidity. Like in some cases, you don't want to be so rigid that you're unable to move out of a genuinely bad situation. But in other cases, you need to be flexible enough to abandon your plan or like rigid enough to stay with the plan even when it gets hard. Like it is a tough thing. I think what is most difficult now with the internet and like just being able to see all of the amazing things that you possibly could do is there's so much optionality. And so I think it's very easy to fall in love with this idea of like, oh, my life will be better if I just got this other job.
Yeah.
And I get the sense that people start thinking about that earlier and earlier. It's like day 3 and they're like, gosh, if I had another job, like life would be so amazing.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be honest with yourself. Like, is it the job you have now or is it your own mindset?
Yeah.
Like, are you actually ever going to be happy in your role?
Yikes.
And I mean this like not to make this absolutely
so sad.
I'm gonna do an insane analogy, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Okay.
It's like I do view it as like almost dating. Like there comes a time where you have infinite options and you could break up and you could go find someone even better. But you also, in order for the relationship to be as best as it can be right now with the person you're currently with, it takes a level of commitment. And if you're always thinking about, oh, this other thing that could happen, you're not giving it your all to the actual situation. And you might not really discover that it is good. It is great. And there's this really interesting concept by this psychologist named Howard Simon called satisficing, which is basically, are you a maximizer or are you a satisficer? And maximizers always try to find the best possible scenario all the time. They might jump around a lot. They're really trying to find the perfect role, the perfect person.
Right.
Satisficers, you have a bar. Like, if it's not good enough, I will leave. But once it is good enough, I commit fully and I maximize my current situation. And I think figuring out which one you are, because there's pros and cons to both, is also very important as you're figuring out, should I stay or should I go?
Sure, yeah. And I think that is a super unhinged analogy. And
It makes sense.
I don't know about that.
Okay,
but
we'll talk offline.
That being said, I do understand what you're saying. Like, are you the kind of person that wants to be like to get just at 51% and like feel really, and then you commit, you feel really confident in the role?
Yeah.
Another thing that I think the career planning process does is it helps you identify what type of person you are. And it also, like, if you're thinking about all of the potential shiny objects, new jobs that you could have, it almost like takes that, like, let's say 180 spectrum and like narrows it based on your career map, based on your North Star. It's like, yeah, there's this new shiny job that's like a higher title and higher pay, but it's so far off from what you really want to be doing that it just becomes a non-starter. It's like, no, I'm going to stay here because this gets me one step closer to my North Star versus this exciting, complete diversion.
Yeah. I literally think like well, I would say early in your career, you should do a lot, like I said, because it gives you these like things to be like, okay, is this job in a vacuum is maybe good, but compared to other roles I have, I actually start to understand what an average job looks like. And so you want to have a lot of dots early in your career. I think at some point, I actually think it is key to like embrace good enough. And if you're always looking for the next shiny object, you're just going to be hopping back and forth and back and forth. And I think there is some like really beautiful thing about saying like, okay, I've done my due diligence. I know I'm good at this. I know this is like close enough to really what I want. And now I'm going to commit and become as great at this as possible. And every day, like I'm not thinking about leaving. I'm thinking about how can I make the most impact today. And I think the people that are able to do that often find that their careers, once they make that commitment, accelerate. But if you're always half in and half out, it's really hard to do the work necessary to get to the level you want to go.
And I think that's a really good downside of strict career mapping, career planning, is that you're thinking so far out in advance that you're always thinking about that next step. What 3 things can I do today to get me to get promoted and a different job? You know? And so if you're not focusing on like, how do I maximize this current job? Instead, you're like, okay, well, I'm 3 steps away from where I wanted to be right now. Of course, you're going to be miserable and you're not going to end up getting that promotion.
Yeah. It's my previous boss, Chuck, who we've talked a lot about this podcast. He was CEO of this company, but he was CEO for 16 years, but he didn't start as CEO. He started as, I think, some marketing person. And I would ask him, like, did you have a career plan? And he literally would be like, I don't believe in career plans. Like, I knew I liked the company well enough. I knew I liked my role well enough. And I was not focused on, like, what title I wanted. I was not focused on leaving. I was focused on showing up every day and doing the best I can. And then developing the habits daily that would allow me to thrive in my role. And then, like, because I was good, people kept giving me more and more opportunities. So, yeah, I don't think, like, you should have a plan because planning is helpful, but, you know, plans are useless. But I think it is more important to focus on, like, your daily habits of becoming excellent at what you do. And I think people have this idea that, like, oh, just make a plan and then it's going to work out. That's the easy part. The hard part is showing up every day and putting in the work.
So I think that's one of my main tactics out of this episode is, like, if you're in a career rut, similar to like the story I was saying about finance wanting to leave and not sure where to go. Like if you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you don't know what to do next, really deep self-awareness work and career mapping can be extremely useful. If you feel good on the path that you are, like career mapping, career planning can actually harm your experience because you're now like, well, this is good, but like, am I not doing enough? It's like, am I not thinking about the future enough? So like, kind of vibe. If it, like that's my like if you don't have to, like, don't career map. You know, just like
Kayla's putting on her like fun aunt hat, who's just like
just hang out,
see what happens. Like have another margarita.
Yeah, but like maybe the better way to say it is like the way you said it, which is like focus on maximizing every day at your role. But just vibe, brother. Like it's fine.
I love it. I have some tactics too, and I think this is a good place to like kind of synthesize what we had talked about. The first is those spiky traits. I think like the key to team awareness and the key to career planning is self-awareness. So much of life comes down to that. And so figure out what makes you unique. And I don't mean this in like a, you know, manifestation girly like type.
Or
maybe I do, but like figure out what makes you unique and like what you are really, you know, different at, and then find the context where those spiky traits allow you to be really effective. And you're probably going to love a role that you're good at. Like, I think those two are intimately tied. The other thing is, you know, have this North Star or this mission statement and make it one that is more values-based, that can be flexible depending on the title or the role you have, but still allows you to articulate the values and the impact you want to make in the world. And then particularly early in your career, but I think you can do this whenever, collect dots. We learn who we are not through theory, but through practice. And so you're going to be in a really tough spot if you turn, you know, I'm 31. Like if I was in my position now, but I'd only done one type of role, I would be worried because I just don't have a lot of dots. And I'd be like, am I headed towards a midlife crisis where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know what the F I want to do besides this. So collect some dots. It doesn't need to be new roles. It could be side projects. It could be volunteering. Like collect some information about what you like to do. That's going to make any pivots you make easier. And then my last thing, yes, we've talked a ton about plans and if they're useful or not. This whole episode is called career mapping or career planning. But I do think like daily habits matter as well.
Yep.
Those are much harder to do. It's very fun and sexy to sit down and be like, in 5 years, I'm going to be the president of the United States. Yeah. But it's like thinking about what habits do you have to have every single day? What level of commitment do you have to your current role? That's going to take you to where you want to go. That's harder, but I think it's much more important.
I love that. I think that's a pretty good spot to wrap.
There we go.
Amazing.
We've solved careers. We've solved so many things in this podcast.
It's crazy how in 30 minutes we're just solving stuff.
Yeah, we should do an episode on like cancer. We would have this thing solved in like 10 minutes. That's it for me.
Yeah, let's roll the credits.
Let's roll the credits. Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Ed Lewis.
Kate Noel is our SVP of People Operations.
And our chief content officer is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all.